各位觀眾，而家翻嚟週一長談，我哋而家繼續咧就同咧溫哥華市長另外一位候選人 Kennedy Stewart 咧同我哋傾下偈嘅。Kennedy, so before we just talk about affordability, now we're talking about money-related issues.
Right.
Yeah, there are research probably you may have seen before. They rank how much city government spend per capita among all city and area in Metro Vancouver.
Right.
And Vancouver is ranked the third highest in all areas.
Right.
What's your comment about that? Do you think is it not efficient, or is it fair to spend that much per capita in Vancouver? What's your call? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so you always have to pay attention to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I ran with Jack Layton and with Tom Mulcair, we committed to balanced budgets, which is something I think is important. And of course, at the City of Vancouver, by law, we have to have balanced budgets. So I have to abide by that if I'm mayor. The thing is, Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, the City of Vancouver is the center of the region. It's the core city. And so because of that, we have the sports teams, and we have fireworks, and we have all kinds of celebrations, and we have things like hockey riots. And we have, so what that does is it does increase the cost for the city. So policing costs are higher. We have the fire boats, we have specialized police forces. And so what that does is it adds extra burden. So we have a lot of benefit from having these great things downtown, but we also have an increased burden because we have to provide services for all these people. The City of Vancouver is 650,000 people, but during a workday, it goes well over 1 million. So we have to provide for all those people. And that's why usually in most cities around the world, the center of the city usually has a slightly higher tax cost because there's so many services. But that's a fantastic, I mean, look at Vancouver, everybody loves downtown, and that's the kind of price you pay for being there, is a slightly higher tax. But you do have to be prudent, and you do have to tell people why your taxes are a little higher in order that they understand that. So I would continue to do that, and in fact be more transparent in where the money's coming.
So in your opinion, do you think there's any more room for improvement in terms of efficiency, or anything that they may save a bit of money that it doesn't cost any extra dollar, or it may provide the same service with the lower cost, or even they can provide more service with the current cost structure? Do you think there's any room for improvement in that?
Yeah, so a lot of the costs that the city has are fixed costs. So for example, the policing budget, that's a quarter of our annual operating budget. And so if I was going to go to citizens and say, well, we can reduce costs in the city, but we'll have to reduce the number of police officers, I think they would say no. Or I could say, the fire department in Vancouver has not had a staff increase for about 20 years. So the city has been trying to keep a line on that, but I do think people want to feel safe, and I would not want to reduce the public safety budget. So these are things that you have to constantly talk to citizens about. And you have to have a read on things, and you have to say that is this worth it for citizens? And you talk to citizens and see, and then of course there's always elections, and if people don't like what you're doing, then they don't elect you. So that's the good thing about democracy, is that people will let you know if they're unhappy.
Okay, so now we talk about the government operation. Now we talk about some lobbyists that you have mentioned. It's one of your key major concerns you have in your platform.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there are lots of lobbyists influence the officials right now in the City Hall. So can you share any specific example, like what kind of influences that was doing and that really impact to the Vancouver people, and also like making more unfairness to the Vancouver residents?
Sure, I mean, perhaps I'll use examples from my own life. So as a federal member of parliament, I have to follow the strictest rules in the world. So for example, conflict of interest rules and lobbying rules are very, very tight on members of parliament. So for example, I cannot receive any donations from unions. I cannot receive any donations from corporations. So for an election fund, for example, conflict of interest, I have to disclose all my assets, and I have to disclose my wife's assets and incomes, which is very, some people will transfer their homes to their partners, so they hide that. So that's all disclosed. Plus in Ottawa, if I ever meet with a lobbyist, it's recorded and it's public. So you can go on a website right now and you can see the lobbyists that I met with that are, mainly from local groups. But that level of transparency that I've had at the federal level, I want to bring down to the local level. I'm not doing that to imply that there's wrongdoing now, but let's take, for example, Montreal. Montreal has had a history of municipal corruption. They've had inquiries, and I don't want that to happen here. So I want the toughest laws in place to make sure politicians are held to account. But at the same time, I don't want to cast aspersions on past councils. I don't think that's fair. But what I want to do is make sure going forward that I operate, if I'm mayor, under the toughest laws, so people have absolute confidence that what I'm doing is above board and they can see it. They can go to the public records if they're that's all available to them. So that's what it is at the federal level, that's what they do at the provincial level, and we need those laws at the local level.
So based on what you're saying, right now is your major concern is there's lack of transparency in the City Hall level, but it doesn't mean any officer is doing any wrongdoing, anything they're not doing right.
That's absolutely true. And I think that it's a difficult job being a politician. There's a lot of competing pressures. People aren't always nice to you. So I do really have the utmost respect for people who do become elected and serve public office, and I in no way want to imply that that past councils have done anything wrongdoing. And in fact, I know that they've acted with complete discretion. But the thing is, I want to ensure that future councils do. There's billions of dollars in property here. There's a lot of global pressures, and I want to make sure that the councillors are absolutely immune, and the mayor is absolutely immune from any kind of accusation of wrongdoing or actually doing this. The other rule I would bring in is, this has happened in Vancouver, and I give you a specific example. The person that has been negotiating for the city with private developers on how much developers would pay to build their buildings, pay the city, that person has now left the city, and he's gone over to work with the biggest developer, Aquilini. So he walked out of City Hall, walked across the street, and went to work for Aquilini. So I said, if I come in as mayor, there would be a 12-month cooling off period. Many private companies have this. The provincial government has this. We can't have staff moving from city to developers, from developers to the city, because there's too much at stake. So I don't want to cast aspersions on this gentleman that's moved, but I do think that as a rule, can't happen.
Do you expect a lot of resistance? Because some people, they may do in a good faith. They may not doing anything conflict of interest, but on appearance it may be lack of transparency. They may do something on appearance, it may not look right, but it make them inconvenient. But that means they may resist when you implement those changes. And how do you deal with those resistance?
Well, I've been passing legislation in Ottawa for 7 years. I know how to do that, and I do know how to overcome resistance. But I don't think there will be any resistance. I think that this will be something that'll be embraced, because if 99.9% of public servants do a good job, and they don't, and they're totally above board and honest. But what it does for them is it makes it all transparent. So the public, it reinforces the trust, and that's really what these laws do. I don't expect them to catch anybody out, but I do expect it will increase the public faith in the city council.
And how can you share some example how you deal with those resistance from your experience as an MP?
Sure. Well, I can give you a concrete example. In the last Parliament, I was elected with Jack Layton, but Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister, and I put forward a piece of legislation to make Canada a more democratic place. Mr. Harper, did not want this legislation to pass, so he has more votes than I do. So every single other vote in the House of Commons, he had won. But what I did is I went and talked to Stephen Harper's Conservative members of Parliament, and when it came from my vote in Parliament, eight of Stephen Harper's Conservatives voted with me, and then the bill passed. So I have a reputation in Parliament for being persuasive, but also being very straightforward. I don't ever attack people personally. We only talk about policy. I don't hold grudges, and you won't see me on social media or Twitter attacking people. I don't ever do that, and I try to always build bridges, and I start with my opponents. That's who I need to build bridges with first, and then that's how I've been effective. I've actually had 2 pieces of legislation passed. The second one was to toughen up the impaired driving laws. So I was able, just as I finished the parliamentary session in June, to get this new toughen up in the criminal code, change to the criminal code to make it tougher on impaired drivers.
I see. Okay, so now we talk about affordability, we
Yes.
talk about the lobbyists, the government transparency. Now, I think there's one long-term problem we would like you to see what's your stand and what's
Sure.
your opinion. It's about Vancouver East Side. This has been a really long
Yes.
issue.
Yeah.
I think every single year, all levels of governments, they spend tons of money,
Yes.
lots of volunteer, lots of people. They try to do their job to resolve the issue. But right now, the issue is still here.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Why we cannot get it resolved? Once you become mayor, is any new strategy you can bring to address this?
I can tell you my general approach is that I grew up in a very small town in Nova Scotia, and my grandfather was an Anglican priest. So he really taught me to treat everybody like a neighbor, rich or poor, tall or short, whatever. They're all neighbors, and that's where the starting point for me is that everybody in the city for me is a neighbor, and they're equal. Now that doesn't mean that they're all equal in need, and some people have more needs than others. Some people do perfectly fine in their lives, but some people find themselves in great difficulty. So I have a compassion, but as I said, I understand that we have to, make sure that the city works for everybody. So, for example, I went to Chinatown. I went through all the businesses, small businesses in Chinatown, and I talked to the owners and the managers about what they needed. And there's a lot of stress in Chinatown, a lot of stress. But what I can do is what I've done in Parliament is to bring people together to try to help down there the best I can. And I've done it before. I used to work in the downtown east side, and so I understand the partners and the difficulties. I think that the thing to know that is you're never going to solve homelessness completely or addiction. What you're going to do is manage it better. And so manage it in a way that works for merchants, that works for the people that are suffering addiction, and then just regular people in Vancouver that are visit the area or live there. So I don't actually think it's anything new. All cities face these pressures, but the thing is to remember everybody is a neighbor and they have to be treated with respect. But second, we do have to make sure that we bring everybody together to look for solutions.
So right now you're looking for all the consultation to bring any new ideas, or you want to do in the same way?
Yeah, well, I will be announcing tomorrow, actually, that I will have a task force, an emergency task force on the downtown east side. We have many drug overdose deaths there, which is terrible. I have been down. I've gone through the markets, the markets that are along Hastings Street. I've talked to the frontline nurses and doctors, the folks that are really trying to help the community there and to understand the issue, but to make sure that we're bringing in solutions that will work for everybody in the area. So this task force will give me expert advice, and I've brought in the best people. I intend to bring in the best people, the experts in the area to do what we can to first help the people that are suffering, but second, make sure that the merchants in that area can operate businesses. And it's a tough challenge. All mayors have faced it, and I intend to. It is a very, very important part of my agenda.
Yeah, for sure, it's a really big challenge to everyone. So now my final question. So you're running mayor as an independent candidate.
Yes.
So as we expect, the council, all the councillors, they highly likely will come from different political spectrum or different political
they
parties.
Will, definitely, yeah.
How do you gain enough support in every issues you want to implement? Do you have to persuade to every single party every time, or how do you work out as a mayor to lead the city government?
Yeah, I mean, I decided to run as an independent because I thought it would allow me to talk to all parties. So I talked to the Green Party. I know Adrian Carr very well. COPE, I've done some work with COPE in the past, so I know Jean Swanson very well. And with Vision Vancouver, when they used to come to Ottawa, I would see them all the time, so I know them very well. And I'm very happy to say that One City, a new party, has endorsed me today. I'm still independent, but they like my platform and they like my leadership qualities, so they've decided to endorse me today, which is a big deal. And it does show that I can bring people together. And that's what I've done in Ottawa. Last year, I don't know, do you know Michael Chong? He's a Conservative Member of Parliament leadership candidate. We wrote a book together. So a Conservative and NDP got together and we wrote a book about how to make Parliament a better place to work. And so I'm able to, I think I've demonstrated that I'm able to work with people that you would think would be my opponents, and then we can get things done together, and that's what I'll do in City Council. And I do have I do have the 7 years of parliamentary experience to do that. I do have a plan that's transparent. It's on my website now about the housing, and I do also have experience working in the city at the planning department, so I can get to work right away.
Okay, thank you for your time, Kennedy.
Thank you very much.
今日嘅節目時間嚟到呢度啦，我哋下個禮拜會同大家講下其他話題。